The phone was ringing, middle of the night. No good news ever comes at 3 a.m. I fumbled for it in the dark, my heart already racing before I even saw Claire's name on the screen. When I answered, I heard something that would haunt me forever. My daughter's voice, broken, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "Mom, please." He hit me. Richard hit me. The words didn't make sense at first. I sat up, my hands shaking. "What? Who hit you?" "Claire, what happened?" "The food was too salty." Her voice cracked. "I made dinner and it was too salty, and Richard, Mom, he slapped me across the face. And Ethan just stood there. He saw everything and he didn't do anything." The room spun. My baby girl, 28 years old, married for 3 years, living 2 hours away in what I thought was a happy home, and her father-in-law had put his hands on her, over salt. "I'm coming," I said. "Right now. I'm on my way." "No, Mom, they're all asleep now. I needed to hear your voice." But I was already out of bed, already reaching for my clothes. The line between before and after had just been drawn. Everything was about to change. If you're watching this, please subscribe to our channel. We're new here, and we post new videos every day. Stories like this need to be told. They need to be heard. My name is Diane Walker. I'm 55 years old, and I'm an accountant in Mexico City. I've spent my whole life dealing with numbers, organizing chaos into neat columns that balance at the end. I thought I was good at seeing patterns, at noticing when things didn't add up, but I missed it. God help me. I missed all the signs with my own daughter. That night, after Claire's call, I woke my husband, Mark. He's a police officer, has been for 30 years. When I told him what happened, his face went stone cold. That look I've only seen a handful of times in our marriage. The look that means someone crossed a line they can never uncross. We got in the car. Mark drove. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the city lights blur past, and I forced myself to think back, to remember, to see what I'd been too blind to notice before. Claire met Ethan 5 years ago at a work conference. He seemed perfect at first, polite, well-dressed. He worked in finance, came from what appeared to be a respectable family. His father, Richard, was a retired businessman, stern but seemingly decent. His mother had passed away years earlier from cancer. The wedding was beautiful. Claire looked radiant. I remember thinking she'd found her person, the way I'd found mine with Mark. She was my only child, my miracle baby after years of trying, and she'd always been strong, independent, full of dreams. She wanted to open her own design studio someday. She painted on weekends. She hiked mountains and laughed too loud and never let anyone dim her light. But after the wedding, something shifted. It was subtle at first. Claire moved into the Miller family home, a large house in the suburbs where Ethan and his father both lived. Richard had insisted. "Family stays together," he'd said. "It's tradition." Claire had laughed it off, said it was temporary, just until they saved enough for their own place. That was 3 years ago. The calls became less frequent. When we did talk, Claire sounded tired. "It's just been busy," she'd say. "Richard has very specific ways he likes things done. I'm still learning, as if being a grown woman in her own home required learning to please someone else's father." The visit stopped almost entirely. "Richard doesn't like disruptions to his routine," Claire explained once. "Maybe next month." And I believed her. I thought she was just adjusting to married life, to living with family. I thought it was normal. God, what a fool I was. Mark gripped the steering wheel harder as we drove through the dark. "We should have seen it," he said quietly. "All those canceled plans, the way she stopped talking about her painting." He was right. Claire used to send me photos of her artwork all the time, vibrant canvases full of color and life. But those messages had stopped over a year ago. When I'd asked about it, she'd said she was too busy with household responsibilities. Household responsibilities. The words tasted like ash now. We arrived at the Miller house just as dawn was breaking. It was a cold morning, the kind where your breath makes clouds in the air. The house was massive, 3 stories, perfect lawn, iron gates. From the outside, it looked like the American dream. Inside, my daughter was crying because someone had hit her over salt. Mark knocked on the door, hard, the kind of knock that says this isn't a social call. Richard answered. He was in his 60s, tall, with silver hair, and a face that probably looked distinguished to most people. To me, he looked like exactly what he was, a man who thought his power gave him permission. "Mr. Walker, Mrs. Walker." His voice was calm, too calm. "It's quite early for a visit. Where's Claire?" Mark's voice was level, but I knew that tone. He was holding back a storm. "She's asleep, as you should be. I don't know what she told you, but she told us you hit her." I pushed past him into the house. "Where is she?" Richard's jaw tightened. "That girl is dramatic. I barely touched her. She needs to learn that when you live in someone's home, you follow their rules." The dinner was inedible. Someone had to teach her. Mark stepped between us. "You don't touch her, ever. I don't care what excuse you think you have." "Excuse?" Richard's eyes went cold. "This is my house. Ethan is my son. That girl needs to understand her place in this family, and if Ethan won't discipline her properly, then discipline." The word came out of me like a snarl. "She's not a child. She's not your property." "Mom!" Claire's voice came from the stairs. I turned and my heart shattered into pieces. My beautiful, strong daughter looked like a ghost. She was pale, thinner than I remembered, wearing a long-sleeved sweater despite the warm house. Her left cheek was swollen and red. The outline of fingers was still visible where Richard had struck her. I crossed the room in seconds and pulled her into my arms. She collapsed against me, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to see." "Shh. It's okay. We're here now." Behind her, Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked uncomfortable, but not upset. Not angry at his father for hurting his wife. Just uncomfortable. Like we were making a scene. "This is a family matter," he said, coming down slowly. "Claire shouldn't have called you. She's fine. Dad didn't mean to hurt her. He just what?" Mark's voice could have cut steel. "Just decided his daughter-in-law needed to be hit? Is that what you're telling me?" Ethan's face flushed. "You don't understand. Living here has rules. Claire knows that. She agreed to it when we got married. Dad has certain expectations and you let him hit your wife." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You stood there and watched your father assault Claire, and you're defending him? It wasn't assault, it was—" Ethan stopped, seeing the look on all our faces. Even he couldn't finish that sentence. Claire pulled back from me slightly. Her voice was small, broken. "I've been trying to leave," she whispered. "But Ethan always talks me into staying. He promises it'll get better, that if I just try harder, learn better, do things the way Richard wants them. He says it's my fault for being difficult." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about one slap. This was years of control, years of isolation, years of my daughter being slowly crushed under the weight of two men who saw her as something to be managed, not someone to be loved. If you've made it this far, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like. It's very important to us. It shows YouTube that this content matters to you, that these stories matter. We took Claire home with us that day. Ethan tried to stop us at the door, but one look from Mark shut him down. Richard threatened to call the police. The irony of threatening a police officer with police wasn't lost on anyone, but we walked out with our daughter anyway. The drive back to our house was quiet. Claire sat in the back seat, staring out the window. I kept turning around to look at her, to make sure she was really there, really with us. "When did it start?" I finally asked. Claire was silent for a long time. Then, the day we moved in, Richard had rules. So many rules. How to clean, how to cook, when to speak, when to be silent, what to wear. Nothing too revealing, nothing too colorful. "Modesty is a virtue in this family," he'd say. Her voice was hollow, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. Ethan said it was just his dad being old-fashioned, that if I gave it time, Richard would warm up to me. So I tried. I learned his recipes. I cleaned the way he wanted. I stopped going out with friends because he said it was inappropriate for a married woman to socialize without her husband. "Claire," my voice broke. I stopped painting because the smell of the paint bothered him. I stopped wearing my favorite clothes because they weren't family appropriate. I stopped calling you as much because every time I did, Richard would interrogate me afterward. "What did you tell them? You better not be complaining about this family." Mark's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "Because I was ashamed." Claire's voice cracked. "I'm supposed to be smart, strong. How did I let this happen to me? How did I become this person who's afraid to make dinner wrong?" I climbed into the back seat with her, held her while she cried. "This isn't your fault," I said firmly. "None of this is your fault." But even as I said it, I was screaming at myself inside. How had I not known? How had I not seen my daughter disappearing? Over the next few days, the full picture emerged. Claire stayed with us, and slowly, she began to talk, really talk. The rules had been endless and arbitrary. Richard controlled everything: the temperature in the house, the television channels, the food in the refrigerator. Claire wasn't allowed to have guests without his permission. She couldn't leave the house without telling Ethan where she was going and when she'd be back. Her job had been the first thing to go. "It's not necessary," Ethan had said. "I make enough for both of us, and it'll give you more time to take care of the house the way Dad needs." The way Dad needs. Not the way we need as a couple. The way his father needed. Her friends had fallen away one by one. Invitations declined. Calls unreturned. Eventually, they stopped reaching out. "I don't blame them," Claire said. "I became so boring, so careful. I was always worried about getting home on time, about what I was saying, about whether I'd get in trouble." "Did Richard hit you before?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Not with his hand, but there were other ways." Claire's eyes were distant. "He'd slam doors near me when he was angry, throw things. Once he kicked a chair so hard it broke against the wall, inches from where I was standing. And Ethan would say, 'You shouldn't provoke him. You know how he gets.' As if terror was something she deserved for making mistakes. The salt incident had been the breaking point. Claire had cooked dinner, a roast chicken with vegetables, one of Richard's favorite meals, but she'd oversalted the vegetables. An honest mistake. Anyone could make it. Richard had taken one bite and spit it out. "This is garbage. You can't even do this one simple thing, right?" Claire had apologized, offered to make something else. That's when he'd stood up, crossed the room, and struck her hard enough to knock her against the counter. And Ethan? Ethan had said, "Claire, apologize to my father. You ruined his dinner." That was the moment something in my daughter had finally broken open. Not broken down, but broken open. The moment she'd locked herself in the bathroom and called me, sobbing into the phone. Mark and I made a plan. We documented everything. The bruise on Claire's face, her testimony, the threatening text messages Ethan had sent after we took her home. "You're making a mistake," he'd written. "Dad just wants what's best for the family. Come back and we'll forget this happened." Forget. As if you could forget violence. As if you could forget fear. We went to the police station. Claire filed a formal complaint. The officer taking her statement was young, professional, and kind. She listened without judgment as Claire described years of psychological abuse, control, and the final physical assault. "This is domestic violence," the officer said gently. "You did the right thing by leaving, and by reporting it." Claire nodded, but her hands were shaking. "What happens now?" "Now we investigate. We'll talk to your husband and father-in-law, and you need to stay somewhere safe." She was safe with us, or so we thought. 3 days after Claire filed the complaint, they came for her. It was almost midnight. Mark and I were in bed, half asleep, when we heard it, the sound of breaking glass downstairs. Mark was up instantly, years of police training kicking in. "Stay here," he told me, reaching for his service weapon in the nightstand. But I was already moving, already running to Claire's room. "Claire! Claire, get up!" She was awake, sitting up in bed, her face pale in the moonlight. "What's happening?" "Someone's in the house. Come with me." Downstairs, we could hear voices, male voices, angry. "Claire, get down here now! This is ridiculous!" That was Ethan. Mark was at the top of the stairs, weapon drawn. "You broke into my house. Get out. Now." "That's my wife!" Ethan shouted. "You can't keep her from me?" "She's not your wife anymore," Mark said coldly. "She's filing for divorce. And you need to leave before I arrest you." "Arrest me?" Richard's voice now, booming through the house. "You think you can threaten my family? You think you can turn my son's wife against us?" I pulled Claire into our bedroom, locked the door, called 911. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. 911, what's your emergency? There are 2 men breaking into our house. My husband is a police officer. He's armed. We need backup immediately. Gunshots. The sound was deafening even from upstairs. Claire screamed. I dropped the phone and threw myself over her, instinct overriding thought. More shots. Shouting. The crash of furniture. "Mark!" I screamed. "Mark!" "Stay there." His voice, thank God. He was alive. "Stay in the bedroom." Sirens in the distance, getting closer. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The sirens got louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Officers poured into the house, their own weapons drawn. Police! Everyone on the ground. Slowly, carefully, I helped Claire stand. We stayed in the bedroom until an officer came to get us, verified we were okay, led us downstairs. The living room was destroyed. The coffee table was overturned. Picture frames were shattered on the floor. And Mark was sitting on the couch, holding his arm. Blood seeped between his fingers, but he was alive, conscious, aware. "I'm okay," he said when he saw my face. "It grazed me. I'm okay." Ethan and Richard were on the floor in handcuffs. Ethan was crying. Richard was still shouting, still demanding to be released, still insisting he'd done nothing wrong. "You broke into a police officer's home," one of the responding officers said flatly. "You're done." The EMTs arrived. They patched up Mark's arm. The bullet had indeed just grazed him. Nothing major damaged. Claire sat beside him, holding his other hand, her whole body shaking. Richard wouldn't stop talking. Even in handcuffs, even surrounded by officers, he kept insisting he had a right to retrieve his family, that Claire belonged to them, that we had no right to interfere. "She's not property," I finally snapped at him. "She's a human being, and you're a monster." He looked at me with cold eyes. "You've ruined my son's life." "No," Claire said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "You ruined his life. You taught him that control was love, that fear was respect, and I almost let it destroy me too." Her voice was steady now, stronger than I'd heard it in years. "But I'm done. I'm done being afraid. I'm done being small. I'm done." They took Ethan and Richard away. The charges were extensive: breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted kidnapping, domestic violence. They'd brought a gun into the house. They'd fired at a police officer. They'd tried to drag Claire out by force. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was serious crime. Mark had to stay overnight at the hospital for observation. Claire and I stayed with him. We sat in those uncomfortable hospital chairs, under fluorescent lights, drinking bad coffee, and trying to process what had just happened. "I almost went back," Claire said suddenly. "Before I called you that night, I almost convinced myself it wasn't that bad, that I was overreacting, that maybe if I just tried harder." "I'm glad you called," I said. "I'm glad you trusted us enough to tell the truth. I was so scared you'd be disappointed in me, that you'd think I was stupid for staying so long." I took her hand. "Never. You're the bravest person I know. It takes incredible strength to leave, to ask for help, to admit when something's wrong." She leaned her head on my shoulder. Outside the hospital window, the sun was starting to rise. A new day, a new beginning. The legal process was long and grueling, but this time, Claire wasn't alone. Richard was charged with assault, making criminal threats, and the break-in. His lawyer tried to paint him as a concerned father-in-law, a man who just wanted to keep his family together. But the evidence was overwhelming. Claire's testimony, the photos of her injuries, the threatening messages, the witnesses who'd heard him raging. Ethan was charged with complicity in domestic abuse, failure to intervene, and his role in the break-in. His lawyer argued he was under his father's influence, that he didn't know any better. The judge wasn't sympathetic. "You're a grown man," she said during sentencing. "You watched your father terrorize your wife for years. You participated in that terror, and when she finally found the courage to leave, you tried to drag her back by force. That's not love. That's not family. That's criminal." Richard got 3 years. Ethan got 18 months plus probation. Restraining orders were issued. Claire was granted a swift divorce. Standing outside the courthouse after the sentencing, Claire breathed in the cool air. "Is it really over?" she asked. "The legal part is," I said. "Now comes the harder part, healing." And she did heal. Slowly, painfully, but she did. Claire moved into her own apartment, small, bright, with big windows that let in the afternoon sun. She started painting again. At first, her canvases were dark, full of grays and blacks, abstract expressions of pain and fear. But slowly, color crept back in. Reds, blues, golds. She started therapy, a wonderful counselor who specialized in trauma and domestic abuse. "I'm learning that what happened to me has a name," Claire told me one day over coffee. "That it wasn't just bad luck or me being difficult. It was abuse. Systemic, intentional abuse." "How does it feel to name it?" I asked. "Scary and freeing, because if it has a name, it means I'm not crazy. It means what I felt. The fear, the confusion, the constant walking on eggshells. That was all real. I wasn't imagining it. She joined a support group for domestic violence survivors. Hearing other women's stories helped her understand her own. And eventually, she started sharing her story too, helping others recognize the signs they might be missing in their own relationships. "I wish someone had told me," she said to me once. "I wish someone had sat me down and said, 'This is what control looks like. This is how abuse starts. These are the red flags.' Maybe I would have seen it sooner." So she became that someone for others. She started speaking at local colleges, at community centers, at churches, telling her story, helping others see what she hadn't been able to see in time. And me? I couldn't just watch anymore. I couldn't just be grateful my daughter was safe while knowing so many others weren't. Mark and I used some of our savings and took out a loan. We bought a small property on the edge of the city, an old house with good bones. We renovated it, turned it into a shelter, a place where women fleeing abuse could stay while they figured out their next steps, a place with good locks, emergency plans, and most importantly, support. We called it Claire's house, not because my daughter wanted the recognition, she didn't, but because her courage to leave, to speak up, to fight back, had inspired it. Her story was the foundation. We partnered with local organizations, hired counselors and case managers, set up legal aid clinics. It wasn't much. It wasn't enough, but it was something. And on opening day, Claire cut the ribbon. She stood there in front of the small crowd, local reporters, city officials, supporters, and she spoke. "I was lucky," she said. "I had parents who believed me, who protected me, who helped me escape. Not everyone has that. This house is for the ones who don't have anywhere else to go, for the ones who are still finding their voice, for the ones who think they're alone." She paused, her eyes shining with tears she didn't try to hide. "You're not alone. You never were. And this house is proof of that." The crowd applauded. I cried. Mark put his arm around me, and together we watched our daughter, our strong, brave, beautiful daughter, step into her new purpose. It's been 2 years now since that terrible night, 2 years since the phone call that changed everything. Claire is thriving. She opened her own small design studio, the dream she'd had before Ethan and Richard tried to erase it. She's dating someone new, a kind man who makes her laugh and never once has asked her to be anything other than herself. Mark's arm healed. The scar is still there, a thin white line that runs from his elbow to his wrist. A reminder, a badge of honor, the night he stood between evil and his daughter. Claire's house has helped 17 women so far. 17 women who walked through the doors scared and broken and walked out standing a little taller. It's not a perfect system. Some of them went back to their abusers. That's the heartbreaking reality of abuse, the cycle that's so hard to break. But others stayed free. Others rebuilt their lives. And Claire? She checks in on them sometimes, meets them for coffee, texts them encouragement, reminds them that healing isn't linear, that bad days don't erase progress, that they're stronger than they know. I see her regularly now. Every Sunday she comes over for dinner. We cook together. Mark grills, I make sides, and Claire brings dessert. We laugh, we tell stories. We exist in the ordinary, beautiful mundane that we almost lost. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I think about what could have happened. If Claire hadn't called, if we hadn't gone to get her, if that night had ended differently. But then I look at her, really look at her, and I see someone who survived. Someone who didn't just survive, but transformed her pain into purpose. Someone who took the worst thing that ever happened to her and used it to light the way for others. That's not just survival. That's heroism. I learned something through all of this. I learned that love isn't always enough. You need action too. You need to be willing to see uncomfortable truths, to ask hard questions, to believe people when they tell you they're in pain, even if they're smiling when they say it. I learned that abuse doesn't always look like what we expect. It's not always visible bruises and broken bones. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle. It's control disguised as care. It's isolation disguised as family values. It's fear disguised as respect. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's calling for help when you're terrified. It's leaving when every instinct says it's easier to stay. It's building a new life when the old one tried to kill you. And I learned that hope is a choice. Every single day, hope is a choice. Claire chose hope. And in doing so, she saved herself. And maybe, just maybe, she'll save others too. If this story touched you, I want you to know something. If you're in a situation like Claire was, if you're afraid, if you're controlled, if you're told that your fear is your fault, please know this. It's not. It's never your fault. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be respected. You deserve to live without fear. And if you see someone else struggling, if you notice the signs, the isolation, the changes, the fear in their eyes, please don't look away. Ask the hard questions. Offer the support. Believe them when they tell you something's wrong. Because sometimes, all it takes is one phone call, one moment of courage, one person who refuses to be silent. That's how lives are saved. That's how we break the cycle. That's how we turn pain into purpose and survival into hope. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. And if you want to hear more stories that matter, stories about courage and survival, and the strength of the human spirit, subscribe to this channel. Some stories are too important to keep to ourselves. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is answer when someone calls. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being part of a community that believes everyone deserves to be free.